Thank you for joining me back here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. We're going to get into the two segments that I mentioned before the break, but before I start all of that, one last time I want to remind you guys, if you have any questions or comments during the show, to use the tip and donations link, GSMCPodcast.net, that you see on your screen there. With any of those, by using the link, I'm able to see your question right away pop up in my chat box. I'm able to react, keep the conversation going, and just read your question out loud to change the direction of the conversation or just make it more interactive. It's a lot more fun for me that way, I believe, and it's a big help for this show as well as all the other shows across the network as well. So again, if you could use that link, gsmcpodcast.net, we would greatly appreciate it with any of your questions or comments. But saying that, I mentioned before the break Davante Adams, how he really put all the rumors, conversations around him potentially wanting to leave Las Vegas, no quarterback being there, a shaky roster, new head coach coming in, not fitting in with Davante Adams. He has come out and really put a nail in the coffin of saying, hey, I want to stay here. All those rumors aren't true. A lot was said at the start of the offseason with him staying there, maybe going to the Jets at the time because they didn't sign Mike Williams. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers was there. They were looking good, great potential there, so Davante Adams was naturally linked to moving to the Jets. But recently, at his third annual youth football camp in Las Vegas, Davante Adams clearly answered on all the questions about his future, and he said, if I wanted to be gone, I'd be gone by now. This is where I want to be. And it's a clear situation. It's clear the situation hasn't gone the way that he planned it. He says he wants to stay, but I don't think if any reporter asked him that it has gone the way he planned it to go, he would say it has. It obviously has not been the smoothest of rides for Davante Adams as a Las Vegas Raider. When he asked for a trade about 2 years ago, he wanted to play with his longtime friend, college teammate Derek Carr, and that didn't end up working out. Derek Carr obviously was moved on to the New Orleans Saints, and Davante Adams was reportedly not happy about that, so there was already some friction there. They had Josh McDaniels as their head coach, but that didn't go great either. This past season to start off, he was fired halfway through the season, and then you had Jimmy Garoppolo as your quarterback. He goes down. Then you have Aiden O'Connell as your quarterback. Then you have this guy, Antonio Pierce, coming in from within the organization to be the interim head coach. A lot of moving pieces, a lot of uncertainty around the team. You're looking at Davante Adams just from his reactions, his body language in some of these games, the frustration. You couldn't help but think, there's only a certain amount of time before Davante Adams decides to leave. This offseason that we're in right now has to be the time for him to move on because in midway through the year, it didn't look great at all for Davante Adams. But then, miraculously, you have Antonio Pierce coming in and just reviving this whole organization, reviving the city to really embrace him, embrace this team, and just get them to play football. The biggest thing about Antonio Pierce, just from an outsider looking in, you look at him, you hear everything he says in the media to reporters and whatnot, and you just get this impression of him that he really just tries to simplify a lot of things, not make it too overblown. At the end of the day, it's just football. They're playing a game as a profession. That seems to be the message that he portrays to all of his players. And just to enjoy it, have fun, and go out there and play hard. And I think a lot of the players embraced that, and it seemed to carry on to the field when they had big wins. They certainly improved with the product that they put out there on the field. They had their biggest win of the season come over the Kansas City Chiefs on Christmas. And then from that point, you saw once Antonio Pierce came in, you saw a lot more stability and a lot more belief and embracing this new identity that Antonio Pierce brought in. And After the season, there were questions about who's going to be the new head coach. Are they going to stick with Pierce or are they going to try and find somebody else? Davante Adams was one of the biggest advocates for Pierce to keep him, getting him the full-time job. And once it was announced, Davante Adams was one of the biggest people on social media that was excited about it. And again, to back up what he said about committing to Las Vegas and being a true believer in what they're doing, you wouldn't have somebody be so excited and so happy for Antonio Pierce if they really wanted to go. Like he said, if he really wanted to leave, he would have already left and not stuck around for that. And it just reaffirms everything that he was saying. He feels that Las Vegas is the place to be now. They're in a lot better place, playing wise, ability wise, skill set that they have on the roster. And he said in that interview at his youth football camp that he is confident in the way that they're going and how they'll compete. He believes they'll be a lot more competitive this coming season. And I probably have to agree with him. If you couldn't already tell, I'm a big fan of Antonio Pierce. The way he came in, how he's portrayed as a person, I think really matters. Not a lot of coaches are that way. You know, you get Andy Reid's, the Mike Tomlins, Antonio Pierce is a great coach, John Harbaugh. All these guys, it seems like they embrace and engage with the players and really wanting to know what the players are all about, how they're feeling, what they see. I think that's how you get the most success and why Antonio Pierce has been successful. As the interim head coach, now there's more responsibility, but I like the way that they're trending. They obviously still need a quarterback. That remains the most important need. Without a quarterback, there's really no contention for any playoff, real contender status if you don't have a good, great, really, quarterback, especially in the AFC that's stocked up with some of the best quarterbacks in the league. You need a quarterback, plain and simple. So, with that being a massive need, you get all these rumors around the Raiders. They have the 13th pick in the draft, and the connection with Jaden Daniels is there. I think that would be the perfect fit, but you're not going to get him at 13. You're going to be lucky if you could get him at 3 if the Commanders don't take him at 2. But even making that jump from 13 to 3 is going to take a huge amount of draft capital. I'm not sure the Raiders can afford that right now, speaking. They've gone better. They've gotten some nice talent come through their doors. Christian Wilkins was huge. Jack Jones has been a revelation for them at defensive back. But they also brought in Alexander Madison. So that does help. But quarterback still remains the need. And I don't think what they have on their roster right now, gambling away their future with just throwing all their first-round picks in to make this trade, I just don't think it's worth it. As much as I would love this to happen, I think it's a perfect fit, but I don't think it's worth the risk, even because you might not know if Jaden Daniels is great. You think he's great. He's projected to be a great quarterback, a great talent, but there is just always that doubt that you really truly never know if it doesn't work out. And if it doesn't work out, then you're in even a worse spot than you were before. So they have to figure that out. And because they're at 13, I think the more reasonable, the more logical move for them is to probably take an offensive lineman with that pick. They're lucky that they're in that range where that's going to be the start of the run for the offensive lineman. And on the quarterback, they added Gardner Minshew, I should say, and it softens the blow a little bit if they're not able to get a young quarterback this year. He played well for Indianapolis. He wasn't awful losing them games. So I think they could swallow another 500 all right year and then really look into quarterback because, like I mentioned, offensive line is still a pretty big need that they would love to improve upon. Last year, or I should say this year in free agency, they lost their starting right tackle, Jermaine Eleanor, in free agency. Their starting guard from last year as well, Greg Van Roten, is also still unsigned. So really, offensive line is the next position that can win you games, certainly, if you have a great offensive line. So I don't think it's a bad thing. You should be disappointed if the Raiders take an offensive lineman here. It's still a massive improvement, and that's where I mentioned the run of these offensive linemen is going to go. Probably starting with the Broncos at 12, as early as I don't think the Jets will draft one at 10. I think they've done enough in free agency to check that off of their list. If they want to add depth, I don't think they need to do it there. They could wait for later rounds. So really, you're looking at 12. The Vikings, I don't really know either because their offensive line is already decent. And I think at 11, they could find another defensive back if they want to go that early or more on the defensive side. I don't see offensive line going. So really, if the Broncos don't do much and just take the best player available or go anywhere else, even if they go offensive line, you're still going to have one of the top picks at that group to improve your offensive line significantly, especially at that right tackle spot, like I mentioned, protecting that side of the offensive line of your quarterback. It's going to go a long way in setting up a potential future draft pick you make at quarterback or signing somebody. That's always going to help. So that's where the Raiders stand in trying to improve this team now that they know Davante Adams is all in. He has believed in this organization. They now just have to improve it, and they've done that, like I mentioned, with Christian Wilkins, Madison. They have to continue to push that envelope and continue to get better in a division where they're probably right now sitting as the second best team. I know that might sound a little bit crazy coming from where they were last year, and you have the Chargers and the Broncos in there, but if you really look at both of those teams, mostly the Chargers, because I just think the Broncos are in that long dog days sort of transition of trying to get out of this hole that they dug themselves in with the salary cap and trying to find talented players, refilling their roster and everything. Looking at the Chargers, they have a new head coach coming in. No real eye-catching offensive weapons right now. They lost them all in trades or free agency. Their defense still needs some improvement. So I think right now the Raiders have the star wide receiver. They brought in more running backs to have it as a running back by committee. Jacoby Myers is an underrated receiver in this league. So talent-wise on offense, like I mentioned, Madison as well, Gardner Minshew there, their offense is looking a bit more reliable at this point than what I'm seeing from the Chargers, just because you don't know where they're going to go in the draft. The Broncos, like I mentioned, are where they are. Defensively, they brought in Christian Wilkins. Jack Jones looked great. So you have some of those players that you look at and you think, all right, they're not the top of the list at their position group, but they are solid players. And sitting second in the AFC this year, finishing there, I think would be great for them overall. I think it's just going to build on this project that they want to keep going. And they're in a great spot to just continue to do that. Get better. Be competitive more than anything. I think that's all Davante Adams really wants, is to have a chance in games, be competitive, not just be written off week after week if you haven't gotten better. Antonio Pierce is a big component of that. I like the way he's building his team. Davante Adams is surely on board with it. I like what the Raiders are doing. The draft is going to play into that a lot more, but we're going to see where they end up. Like I mentioned, if they finish second in the AFC West and have a slight chance of making the playoffs, I think that's still a great season for them and Antonio Pierce. Then a year, 2 years from now, we could potentially see them, if they have the right quarterback, be a lot more competitive in a stocked AFC. Saying that, that's where we'll leave the Raiders. Very exciting, but we're going to move on to the last segment of the show. After this quick pause in the episode, we're going to talk about Dion and dig into more of those teams, those 6 teams that he pointed out he would love to see Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter be drafted to in the 2025 NFL Draft. Don't go anywhere. That's coming up in just a few seconds. You're watching the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.